Hello there.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, good. How are you?
Not bad, not bad.
I just
Um,
realized something
what's that?
because every time we start the show, I get a pop up on my phone.
Uh-huh.
I always get the pop up that Richard Hooper is now doing a live show, whereas he's still on a holiday. So technically, we've got the power to stream to his LinkedIn and Twitter,
And his Twitter, actually. Yep.
and even when he's not here,
Yeah, that's real
power.
power, Wesley.
I have
So
to think about this.
thanks for joining us, everybody, for episode, I want to say 18, hopefully 18, of Cloud
18th
Native Weekly. Yeah, 18
state of
episodes
the
is
database.
pretty good. Yeah, we're going to talk. If you listen to us long enough, you'll know that we've never been big fans of running stateful type workloads um, inside of Kubernetes clusters, but sometimes opinions change, and maybe our opinions are changing. What do you think?
I would say that yes, I always like to complain about people running state in their containers and stateful solutions in containers. However, if I look what I do across customers every week, I I do it quite often actually.
Yeah.
It's a valid requirement. Um, if you're building something from scratch, obviously you want to discuss that with the customer. Like, hey, do you really want to do it like that? We recommend to do it otherwise, but
Mm.
I think for the majority of the projects, we depend on existing solutions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't expect everyone to rewrite the whole thing just because you're moving to Kubernetes or
And yeah,
any other
and
thing.
we'll get into this more in a little bit,
Hmm.
but just because we have personal opinions and the way we want and like to do things doesn't mean we can always impose that on clients. So,
No,
I mean, yeah, stateful workloads and databases within clusters and stuff are valid ways to do things, even
yeah,
if we don't terribly like them or haven't historically liked them. But
I agree.
opinions change, technology
Op-
moves on. So
Opinions change. Yeah, definitely. But how's your week been?
yeah, it's not been too bad. Busy. Um, outside of work, both of our girls have just started ballet, so that's interesting. You know, I mean,
At
they
the
seem to be.
in the same class, or do you now spend
No,
evenings watching ballet?
it's Saturday morning, but they're slightly,
Mm.
or there's what, 2 years between the two of them, so they're in different classes. So it's most of a Saturday morning, but I mean that's fine. We can drop them off and go and get a coffee or whatever. So yeah,
Oh, oh, you
they
drop them off
started.
and then you come back late. I thought Carl Cook does now spend his Saturday mornings watching ballet, but no.
No, I mean we would if we were allowed to kick around and just see how they're enjoying it, but you're not allowed.
Oh,
So yeah, I mean they seem to be enjoying it, which is good. Inside of work, we are. Yeah, I'm still working with that vendor we talked about last week or the week before,
hmm.
building their application infrastructure inside of my client's Azure tenant and Azure subscription. So that's going all right. Converting it from what was relatively public facing to a very strict lockdown, sort of private link focused, private networking focused setup. So, you
Oh yeah,
know, uh, the teething problems that come with that, because when you when you build something in the cloud, if you've got things that are not necessarily wide open, but secured against public networking, you maybe have dependencies that you don't know about. And when you suddenly switch to private networking for everything, those dependencies will suddenly show themselves. So so
yes.
that's been this week and a bit of the week previous as well. So it's good fun. Getting to play with, deploy, and configure. That's the
Hmm.
professional speak, right? API management, function apps for the API backends, and
Hmm.
then a bit of Azure Container Apps actually for um, the client would build functionality that interacts with the APIs and the data set. So they build that inside of Azure Container Apps, which is a pretty interesting setup. You know, at scale, it would probably benefit from a Kubernetes cluster to run that sort of stuff on. Um,
I'd
but
yeah, I think for ACA recently the whole networking thing came out of preview, so now it's
mhm,
officially supported. Large part of it, you need a dedicated plan. Obviously, you can't do it with a consumption plan.
yeah,
Um, what I see across customers is when they have really strict requirements in terms of isolation or per customer isolation, you are going to end up with multiple container environments because
Yes,
it's going
that's
to virtually
exactly what's
nowhere.
going to happen here. Yeah.
And then that could, because if you have that requirement of that absolute isolation, everyone their own VNet,
Mhm.
that's going to end up in quite some Azure Container App environments, which could be quite pricey. And I'd
Mhm.
like to argue
And
that at some point Kubernetes will be cheaper.
yeah, I totally agree with ACA. You have the choices when you're doing the container app environment to either allow it to deploy a virtual network that's managed by Microsoft or to bring your own. I would encourage you to bring your own because you'll be able to interact with private endpoints and stuff like that as well. And to go a step further, if you're running with an enterprise environment, you're probably running hub and spoke or Azure Virtual WAN, and there's route tables and
Mm-hmm.
UDRs and stuff kicking around. The consumption stuff isn't compatible with UDRs and route tables, so you have to go for workload profiles as well. So yeah, there's a few choices to be made when you're doing this for lockdown secured networks.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been pretty interesting. How about your week?
Lots of networking as well. Yeah, did lots of networking configurations, or at least looking at them, debugging them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, no, lots of meetings because end of year, so planning for the
Is
next
that
year is coming up. So that's
is
how it
that why
works.
you're in the Intercept office today?
No, I'm at the office because I actually have a customer meeting
Ah,
straight after this. So I thought, well, didn't want to skip this. So thought, let's do it from the office. So you could hear some noise here and there, but is what it
it's all
is.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's no. My week is mainly meetings, some tech. Usually, I try to because I've got so many meetings. I try to get started in time in the morning and get some tech stuff done in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
When no one's on Teams and no one's adding more tasks through your email inbox. So that helps. That works.
Yeah, and Richard's obviously not with us again this week. He's on his way
Yes,
back from his cruise. He was on a cruise, right?
it was.
Um,
Yeah, it was a cruise, I think.
yeah, seen some pictures on Twitter or X of him being in
The way
in
you're
in
saying that, Twitter or X, I don't, yeah.
yeah, I still refuse to call it X, but yeah, seen some pictures of him in Dubrovnik. So yeah,
Mm,
looks pretty cool. And
yeah,
for fans of Game of Thrones, like the place where King's Landing was, filmed, I think is there or thereabouts. So looks like he had a good time. So yeah, he can do the entire show by himself next week because we've been doing it
yeah,
for two
we did
weeks without
too.
him. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I think next week you're quite the requirement, but we'll get on that when we talk about 10 minutes tech.
yeah.
But first, we're gonna take a look at some news. Alrighty.
Cloud native news. So first up this week is it's been with us for a couple of weeks now. Is the call for papers or call for proposals is still open for KubeCon
Yep.
Paris in 2024. Are you submitting, Wesley?
Yes, but I need to sit down for it and do it.
Get it done. When does it close?
I think somewhere in November. I think there's quite some
So,
time to actually get the proposals in. It's quite a long running
so
CFP.
well, if you said sometime in November, you know that it's October, right? November's not that far away.
No, I know I need to do it. The thing is, I absolutely love doing sessions, public speaking, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to writing for a CFP, or even when you do a meetup, I'm doing a meetup somewhere in November in the
Uh-huh.
Netherlands about Kubernetes and GitOps.
Awesome.
But then you're asked, all right, can you send me an abstract and a title? And for some reason, that always takes me 2 days of thinking before I actually type it within 5 minutes, right? I know that's the thing with the sessions.
No
I love
chat
doing them.
GPTing your session abstracts then.
I could do that, but I don't know. It's just to be fair, the CFP for something like KubeCon or even things like Microsoft Ignite, they take much more effort than
Yeah.
doing something through Sessionize. That's yeah. All right. What else we got?
We have just announced yesterday, I think, coming
Yes,
out of
yes.
Microsoft's innovation or open innovations or whatever it is they call it,
Incubation.
is that's what it
Incubation phase.
is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is the Radius app. Let's
Yeah.
just, I'm going to bring your screen up, Wesley, and we can have a quick look
Yes.
at what Radius is.
Yeah, I don't have the blog post open, but yesterday was a blog post by Mark Rosanovich on Radius. Uh, just been released, and it looks very promising. I mean, I can read
Mm.
what it says, right? Radius is an open source cloud native application platform that enables developers and operators that support them to define. Now, what I really love about this is that we are specifically calling operators. We're not forgetting about ops, because
Yep.
if you're doing this, you still
Hi,
need ops
ops people
people.
here.
Yeah, we're here. I mean, we learned that with Kubernetes right from the start. You still a platform you need to manage. So it's a way to deploy your application. Or it's not a way. It's a solution. It's pretty big.
Hmm.
To deploy your solution, there are some good examples that I just wanted to show. I'm going to play with it over the weekend.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
but I
still
really like
relatively
this.
young. There's still some stuff
Yeah, yeah.
missing as they do call out in these docs.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's for being just released, this is really, really good.
Does this look familiar? This is how you
Looks
deploy an application through Radius on, for example, your Kubernetes cluster running in Azure or AWS or somewhere else. The
sure
language
looks
is
like sure looks like
Bicep.
bicep to me.
Bicep.
Yeah.
That's what I really like, to be able to define your application deployment in Bicep like that.
So
Next to
the cool thing about these docs is as you'll go through, there's some tutorials here. So there's a basic tutorial that you
mhm,
can run through, but there's also, if you've ever been giving demos or stuff on AKS or Kubernetes in general, there's a .NET eShop microservice environment that Microsoft put out
mhm,
that you can use for demos and learning and stuff. It's actually there on the left and underneath the tutorials. There's a Radius slanted version of eShop that you can use Radius to build out, which is really cool as well.
mhm,
So then you can compare the building of it the normal way and building it through Radius. So pretty cool. A lot of thoughts went into this behind the scenes, clearly.
mhm. And I see a question in the chat from Massimo. Hello there. Um, how does this fit or compare to? Well, we're talking about a model, even though there's a lot of tech behind it. Richard on WhatsApp this morning asked
The
exactly the
exact
same,
same question. Yep.
exact same question. I think we're gonna do a show about this and then see how things compare to each other. Um,
Yeah, I think so. I
it,
mean, we're well, we will be committed to what we're talking about next week, but I
mhm,
think certainly the week after, I'd probably like to get Radius on the show. You know, just to have a play and compare it
mhm,
with
yeah.
OAM. So
No, I think that's exactly what we need to do. I mean, I was reading this morning. I think I spent an hour reading. I'm not the person yet to say what's better, what's different, how the
mhm,
comparison works. Um, I did get kind of a feeling with Radius on, we talk about ACA as well. We just talked about ACA, where
mhm,
there you have, things you can leverage Dapper and Kida, but you're limited to what ACA provides. Right
yep,
here with Radius, where technically we can abstract away the whole cluster from whoever needs it, but we still have all the control of all the other third-party solutions or CNTF projects that we want to install. So it kind of
yep.
feels like it comes with less constraints, but it is still, additional servers you have to deploy, additional stuff that needs to run in your
Yeah,
Kubernetes cluster.
and
But I,
it must run on Kubernetes. So it sounds like
yes,
almost that without touching this and without having had to play with it much more than just reading the docs like yourself, Wesley, it feels like this will really sit and slot in well with the platform engineers who are building and supporting the platforms.
hmm
Um, so because it abstracts away some of that from developers and will help the platform engineers. But again, we won't know until we get our hands on it, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, that's exactly what we'll be doing.
we will definitely be doing that. Um, Yeah, there's a good blog on the Microsoft page by Mark Rosanovich. Maybe we'll find it in the meanwhile.
Yeah,
But that
I'll
is a
tweet it.
great way where it explains.
Yeah. If you look for Mark Rosanovich, he tweeted about it last night, and I'm sure we'll tweet the same link out later on today.
Yeah.
So finally
And
on news then.
yeah, I was gonna say Leonard. I hope I
Yeah.
pronounced your name right. I'm glad other people feel the same as well. Thank you. All right, what else we got?
Finally on news before we move on to 10 minutes-ish in tech. We have a new CVE impacting AKS. So before everybody panics, this CVE only impacts AKS in the fact and from the perspective that it impacts anything that has like a web front end. So it's actually a DD denial of service, distributed denial of service vulnerability in HTTP2. So potentially vulnerable AKS and ingress web front ends, that sort of stuff, anything that's potentially using HTTP2. Okay. In terms of are you vulnerable? If you haven't patched your node images or your container base images or anything like that recently, then chances are yes, you are vulnerable. So go out there and have a little read at that link and get updating with your node images and your base images and such to protect against that. Any comment, Wesley?
No, I've seen enough CVs for the upcoming months with what happened in the past couple of weeks. That's been enough for me. All right, what else we got? Do we have something else?
I think you just shared the link for that
Yes,
blog
I
post
just
from
put it in
Mark.
the chat. Yeah, and I'll add because there's a really good image. Can you do my thing up on the screen again?
Of
I'm on
course.
my laptop. I don't want to break stuff. This is the post, and this really depicts the concept of what they're trying to achieve with Radius very well. You build cloud native applications. You need to leverage whatever technology, and then Radius will service you to deploy to any cloud or and the infrastructure recipes. Those are the bicep files that we just looked at. So that kind of made me think of have you used Chef before? Like these, Chef. I used that a long time ago, where you had chef cookbooks and you had the kitchen, which is the playground, and you could use the command knife to do stuff. And kind of made me think of that. But
and this is coming out of the incubations team. I almost said innovations again, but yeah, it's the same team, I believe, where we got Dapper and things like Copacetic and stuff from that are already in the CNCF, the Cloud Native Foundation. So I expect that Radius will probably end up there as well, because that's the place to support and to support and to contribute to open source cloud native applications and software. So yeah, I expect it to end up there as well. But yeah, great stuff again coming out of that incubations. My goodness, incubations.
incubation.
But yeah, I'm looking forward. I really am looking forward. My first thought was, are we trying to get rid of consultants again? Are we really trying to get rid of consultants? But no, I think what this again is doing, just like AI and all of the recent tech announcements, this is something to supplement and support your consultants as you're contributing and helping customers with their cloud native applications landscape. So looking forward to getting to grips with it.
I'm definitely gonna spend probably more hours than I'd like over the weekend to play with this. All right. I'm looking at the time. We need to get to 10 minutes in tech.
Awesome.
All righty. I've already got my screen shared.
Yes, you do.
I do. So databases. And what we're going to be doing is deploy a MS SQL database to Azure Kubernetes Service.
MS SQL, did you say?
MS SQL, yeah.
Oh, I heard MySQL when we said this earlier. MS SQL.
Oh,
Interesting.
MS SQL. I mean, it's a database, right? I mean, there's
database.
And the thing is that, it's still just a pod. It's with any database. You could do MySQL. You also see a lot of Redis running on Kubernetes as well. As a database, you've got MySQL, MariaDB, whatever you want to run. In the end, they are still pods. And that's the thing. We're not, it's a database, but it's a database inside a pod. I was thinking, well, why should you do that? But last week we deployed virtual machines inside pods and did kubevert. So why not this? No, I see that the requirement for this in customer projects, I see that increasing, even though I am probably the first person to say, hey, if you need a database, why not just get Posit, Azure SQL, MySQL Flexible Server, which I really, really like. Why
I
not do it
suppose
like?
maybe the use case is similar to what we talked about last week, where you require super low latency connectivity. Everything in the cloud is a couple of milliseconds away, but if you really, really need that super low latency, then maybe this is a
Yeah.
perfect use case.
And it's mainly the latency from application to the database, the connection between those, right? But in the end, what makes it different from normal, more stateless deployments is not really the fact that it's a database. It's the fact that, if we look at containers, they can restart, right? They can restart over and over and over again. So if you have a container image and you probably tried it. I do it a lot. You log into a container image or to a running container on a cluster because you want to debug some stuff. You install, I don't know, ping or whatever you need. I think it's IP utils, by the way, not ping. But you install that, and then container restarts and it's gone because there's no state, right? You don't want that with a database. If I just did a bunch of queries and then everything is stored in that database and I restart the container or the pod,
that's bad news.
That's a problem. So what you need for that is storage. Now, what we're going to be doing is just using a disk that is running or that's being deployed in Microsoft Azure. But if we go back to the news of last week or even the week before, I'm not even sure anymore, we talked about Azure Container Storage.
Yep.
Now, Azure Container Storage, that's going to be increasing the use case for databases on Microsoft or on Kubernetes, I'd say, or on Azure Kubernetes Service in this example.
Especially when it's backed by the Elastic SAN stuff, which I think is still in preview, right?
I was going to say that, yeah, that's still a gated preview, the Elastic SAN, but they promise really, really low latency and super, super speed. So, that's when it gets interesting, right? You've got an Elastic SAN, and then you've got your database instance essentially running in Kubernetes.
Yeah,
this is going to be very, very powerful. So for today, we're just gonna, and I got a picture here that's in the Microsoft documentation on how this essentially works. I was scrolling through it. Let me see if I can. This is how it works. So what we need is an AKS cluster in this example. So this is mainly, this works for any Kubernetes environment, but the specifics here are that the disk is being provisioned. We'll get to that in a bit. So what I need some storage, which can be a managed disk or Azure Files, or, for example, once it comes out of preview, Azure Container Storage. And then I need a persistent volume, and I need a persistent volume claim. So I'm claiming access to that persistent volume, and that persistent volume is basically the Kubernetes reference. I know if a lot of you do Kubernetes, I'm probably butchering the explanation of this, but we want everyone to understand this is basically the reference to whatever storage is running in the backend, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we need to be deploying. So what we want to do is have a deployment. Within that deployment, we want to deploy that pod. I use the examples that's provided by Microsoft. There's some good examples here. I looked for a reclaim policy. We'll get to that in a second, what that does. But let's just go ahead and deploy this. And I've got my Visual Studio Code here. Yes, I do. I will make it a little bit bigger. Again, I have to do a lot of zooming and in and out because I'm not at my home office. So first, what we need is the persistent volume claim in this case. And I'm using a storage class that's required. And that also says that it's managed and it's an Azure disk. What that does in practice, we'll see in a couple of seconds. And then I've got the persistent volume claim, and this is the claim I can reference for my deployment later on. So if I'm going to do my deployment afterwards, so I've got the PVC and the storage set up, I'm doing my deployment, and then I'm referencing, I think I've got it somewhere here, my persistent volume claim, basically telling the pod, hey, wherever you're storing your stuff, it needs to go there. Whatever you're storing needs to go there. So this is where I'm going to make sure that my database stuff, my data is going to be stored on that disk that is outside of my cluster, that's not following the life cycle of my deployment. Because basically, that's what you want to do, right? When you run something with a state in Kubernetes, you want to make sure that your storage does not have the same life cycle as the deployment and the solution. Because once you do that, everything starts resetting and deleting, and so you want to decouple that. We can do that fairly easily. What we're going to do is, I've got these files here. We're going to cube. This is my other laptop. I can do k apply -f, and I'm going to create the PVC. And then it should go. There we go. And then if we do k describe PVC, we can see that it's provisioning, waiting for a volume to be created, successfully provisioned the volume. And what we can see here is that, just a bit of the details. But what's happening on the Azure side of things, and I had it somewhere, there we go. If I refresh this, we can now see that there's a disk that's been created. And this is the disk that we're going to be storing our stuff on. This disk follows the life cycle of my PVC. So if I delete my PVC, this disk will be gone. And why that is if we go back to this and we do k describe, k get PVC. I have to zoom a bit. K get PV, we need this, sorry. Reclaim policy, delete. What that does, and I think reclaim policies are going to be deprecated going forward because you want to do all the dynamic deployments, which essentially we're doing. What this does is, if I delete this persistent volume, the disk will be deleted as well. So the disk will disappear from Azure. You can also do retain, which means the disk will remain. However, I'd say this is the default and you should do this. You shouldn't delete the PVC. You shouldn't delete the persistent volume itself. Why not? If you have a database on your virtual machine in VM or Hyper-V, would you actually delete the disk? That's how you need to treat this. You don't delete the disk. You leave it there. So what we're going to do now is do the deployment of the database, which is what is it called? K apply -f deployment. And now if we do k get pods, we can see that the MS SQL is deploying. Shouldn't take too long because it's a container, but then again, it is MS SQL, but it's MS SQL in Linux, so shouldn't be too big.
That's pretty cool.
There we go. It's running. So if we do k logs, and we do that, we can see the database is running, it's starting. So this example, as provided by Microsoft, what this does is if we get the services, it's deployed as a load balancer. Now, don't ever do this in production ever. Just don't do it. But it's nice for a demo because now we've got a public endpoint, an external IP that we can use to connect to our database. So what I can do is panic. Yeah, panic. Don't do this in production. But yeah, what I can do here is connect to my database, and I tested this before. Go here, and then we go create a connection. Can use the same one, just a different IP. I'm going to click connect using the Azure Data Studio, and I'm connected to my database.
That's cool.
If I look here, we can see it's got stuff here, and I can click on it and I can do stuff with it to show you that we're actually connecting to the same thing. Let's just delete pod. Remember, we're doing a deployment, so it should just restart. and it will. But if we now refresh, you can see it's not loading, but it's already back up. So that means it's already there, 11 seconds. But you see, we're actually connected to this part, to this deployment, and through this service, and everything is being stored on the disk. As long as I don't delete the persistent volume, we're good. We can just run our state inside Kubernetes. The most important concept here is that you're treating the persistent volume as the actual storage with its own life cycle. So don't delete that. For example, if you're playing with this, or if you are, hopefully we're all doing GitOps and Helm and all that stuff. But I mean, we know that this is the example from Microsoft. I think what's very important about this example is that not everything is in the same file, because now we can just delete the deployment, but this has got a different life cycle. So don't ever put this in the same YAML as your deployment. That's the first learning. Treat it as storage, as if it's a disk. That's biggest lesson. If you do that, I mean, that's fine. That's fine. Then you're just, you can run your database on Kubernetes. And like Karl said, the use case here is low latency, have everything together, or maybe you just want to run your stuff in a container. I mean, no harm done. All good.
All valid use cases. Yep.
Yeah, but it's running MS SQL or MariaDB, any database, or even now we're doing databases, but the same example goes for any application with state that you want to store, whether that's logging or user session information or whatever. Now we're doing it through a disk, but you can also do it through Azure Files. We see that happening a lot. If you need to store stuff in Azure Files, that can be available through the CSI driver as well. Yeah, easy as that. It's really simple to get started with this. It's just really important that you don't expose it as a service like this. You want it to be internal to the cluster. What I would not do this for is deploy Kubernetes, deploy a database, expose it to a network, and then use something outside of Kubernetes to connect to the database. I mean, you could do that for debugging, like with the MySQL Workbench or something. Set up a VPN, do it that way. Running a database in Kubernetes, you only do that if you have the other stuff running in Kubernetes as well. Leave other connections internal. That's the best way to go about it. So just to show what happens if I can do k delete -f deployment, which is going to delete the MySQL database or the MS SQL. I keep saying MySQL. I do so much MySQL, and this so this is going to be gone. Now let's k delete -f the persistent volume, and then see what happens. We have to go back to the Azure portal, but this is what the reclaim policy currently does. So I'm going to refresh this. At some point, it will disappear. Now, if you click refresh, a lot of the times you'll get questioned. Do you want to do it in the simplified view? So I'm not going to do that. Yeah, we'll wait for it. I want to see it being deleted, but that's the. Then again, you can do things like retain, so it remains. But then you're going to have issues with, hey, if you're going to do a new deployment, attach it to the disk. So what you want to do is probably figure out a way to do backups or create snapshots.
And that links us into what we're going to talk about next week, is just following on from this sort of stateful workload within Kubernetes. You're going to want something that's going to be backing this data up, right? So we're going to get to grips next week, unless we really want to talk about Radius a week sooner. But at this point, we're going to talk next week about cloud native data protection with Kason K10 from Veeam. So friend of the show, Michael Cade, he works for Global Technologist, I think is his job title, for Veeam and for Kason. So he talks quite a lot about this sort of stuff. So we're going to get to grips with it ourselves and just have a look and see what Kason can offer us in terms of protecting the data that we're now running inside of or hosting inside of our Kubernetes clusters. So
Yeah, and I think that is the best practice. If you run a database and you have something like this, as you can see, I've refreshed and the disk is gone because of the reclaim policy set to delete. So PVC is gone, PV is gone, and now the disk is gone.
and now you're looking for your backups because your data's all gone.
Exactly, but you want those backups. You even want those backups because what if you just want to migrate or whatever? You want to restore from the backup to a new disk and then make sure that's available. I personally would not try to play with, the disks that already exist and attach to that and make it very complex. I mean, just give it the PV. That's your storage. Treat it as such. And what you said about radius, yes, we will do that the week after, because like the question that Massimo asked in the comments earlier, I really want to spend some time playing with it and see how it fits into the landscape, what the use cases are, what's good, what's bad, what's ugly, what can be better, what we like, what we don't like. Really, really define where it stands, because it sounds very promising. It's very young.
Yep.
And I'm just itching to play with it, to be honest. So
sounds like a plan.
We'll get back to
So
that.
any free time I have in the next week will not be playing with Radius, but we'll be playing with Case and K10. So look forward to showing everybody next week.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome.
And I think with that, we're at the end of the show.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for joining us. As I say, check in with us next week for the latest updates in Cloud Native news and 10 minutes tech on casing, so the Cloud Native data protection. And Richard, subject to him making it home today, will be back with us next week. So
yeah,
look forward to it.
Thank you very much. All right. And
have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.